Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to be reviewing the book Beasts of the Boundless Blue for the Cerulean Sea setting from Alluria Publishing. First off, let me say that I have received this as a review copy, so I want to be above board about that. And I do love alliteration, and Beasts of the Boundless Blue really has a nice cadence to it. I quite like that. Now, this is a monster manual, and who in the gaming world doesn't love a monster manual? This book contains 60 original monsters for this publication, as well as all of the collection of the creatures created by Alluria publication that fit into the Cerulean Sea setting. So you've got a total of 250 monsters. I don't know what this is going for price-wise, but frankly, 250 monsters, all of them focused on an aquatic environment. I personally don't think you can go wrong with this product. Now, one of the things I like about this is a good sampling. I apologize, I was testing something earlier. This is a good sampling of the Alluria Publishing Cerulean Seas setting. A little more alliteration there for you. Because it lets you dip your toes, if you will, pardon the pun, in a little bit of everything that this campaign can contain, from aquatic animals to psionic animals to creatures, I should say, not animals, creatures, to all of the races with little thumbnail sketches of what they have for abilities, which is really nice because if you don't know if you're really interested in the book, as far as using their specific setting, this one publication will let you get a sampling of what they have available for races. Then you can say, I like that idea. Maybe I want to go pick up their setting book that deals with the Arctic, because they've got some ideas for Arctic races that I find interesting. Or you find that you're interested in the psionic creatures. So, I would go pick up their book on psionics, because it's used, not only is it a good book in and of itself, but it uses the excellent Psionics Unleashed rules from Dreamscarred Press. So, in that regard, this book is a complete success. It covers so much information, and all of it is applicable to any campaign that is set in a world that has oceans. So if your game is even vaguely traditional, if you're not playing Dark Sun, this publication will help you find some way of spicing things up and throwing things at your players that they are not going to expect, which is, to my mind, always a good thing. Of course, being a monster manual, it comes out with some pretty standard layouts. It comes out in introduction. It comes out with how to use this in a non-Cerulean Seas campaign. So there's some notes that are not really pertinent if you're familiar with the Cerulean Seas campaign, but if you aren't, they are important. There are the guideline of the glyphs that the book uses. Each entry has a little glyph at the top. It tells you different things about it, like is it unique to this book? Is it about psionics? Is it which environment does it fall into? Tropical, subtropical, Arctic, things like that. So that's very nice little lexicon they got there. Then they have, of course, the monsters from A to Z. They have an artist index. Very nice touch. Oh, and speaking of the art, some of this is new art, some of it is recycled from other publications, but it is all excellent across the board. And some of these pieces are truly lovely, and they're all in full color, which is awesome. We have a glossary, we have pronunciation guide, which is very helpful here. I'll be getting back to that. We have some appendix on aquatic materials that would be unique to an aquatic environment, at least to the Cerulean Seas environment, that would fit into any campaign that has a large bent in the aquatic environs, So if you want to just add some unique items to your campaign and you don't want to adopt the entire campaign, this section can help you. Then we have a section on aquatic arms and armor. I love these kind of things. Then we have a section on aquatic feats, aquatic spells, and powers. Very good. And again, a nice sampling of what you can find in the Cerulean Seas campaign. A list of monsters by challenge rating, very useful. A monsters by terrain, also very useful. And a monsters by type. So you've got everything covered. If you are a GM trying to find how to fit this into your adventure, your crunch time, I need a monster right now. These guys need a CR5. I know the other things that I need to do. I know the terrain and I know what type I'm looking for, but I just need to know what the CR is. Boom, there you go. Or they're in a semi-tropic environment. What should I throw at them? There you go. Or I need to know what there is available for aberrations or for giants. Here you go. Then they have a section on animal companions and, a nice touch, a closing poem. Now, one of the minor critiques I have to make here is that because this is using a lot of unique creatures, they have used names which have a unique feel. Some of them are based on Greek, some of them based on Inuit, or at least vaguely Inuit terms that sound Inuit or look Inuit. And the problem is that some of these are not easy for me, and I imagine many Westerners, to pronounce. But they're also not making a connection in my head. For example, abysmal phoenix. Okay, I know that this is a phoenix that is from the abysmal plane. I can make that connection. Aegion, or Aegion, which I think is how you pronounce it. I have no idea what that reference is. I read the passage, but it's not clicking in my head to make the name stick with the creature. And some of these things have names which are long and multi-syllable, so having the pronunciation guide in the book, I think, is useful. But I still think your average GM is going to have a hard time thinking of these terms when he has to use them in the game. And the players are probably going to come up with their own terms. So if you describe this creature and the thing is non-sentient, so it can't tell you what it is, I think the players are going to come up with their own. They're not going to say, oh, that's an X. They're going to come up with their own term, which is fine, because how it works in the real world, you encounter a creature you've never met before, you're going to name it. So that's a bit a slight bit of a problem. Other than that, the creatures available in here cover the full gamut, from real-world animals to giant and dire version of real-world animals, always useful, particularly if you're a druid. And then into the fantastical, into the strange and bizarre, and of course all of the player character races. Now, as I said, some of the names don't stick for me, but one of the names that did very much stick for me, and I don't know if it's under B or is it under P, I can't remember, but it's piranha bears. Now, you can see over my shoulder, there's an owl bear. I love fantastical fusion creatures. The Chimera, Pegasus, Teraton, the Paraton, all those weird, freaky things, most of which are inspired by the Greeks, but I love those things. And so they fused a bear with the piranha, which is dangerous enough as it is, but they actually come in swarms. And if anybody gets the reference to bear swarms, tell me. I'm curious to see how many people get it. But here you have, folks, stats for swarms of bears that are in the water. I smiled so much when I read that entry. We have plants in here. We have giant hagfish. Sorry, that sounds scary because hagfish are scary in and of themselves. We have the plumed surface, the polar kraken, the kale turtle, so it's a variety of a turtle. The loch jelly selkie, that's a nice ring to it. I'll admit that one does. The swamp kraken, which is a type of cephalopod. The stellar sea cow? That makes me smile as well. But they have manatees and sea cows in here, which is useful because they can fit into a lot of aquatic campaigns or a lot of non-aquatic campaigns because they are animals that are going to have encounters with people who are on ships. The turtle familiar. The void fungus, which is kind of cool. Funguses are always interesting, or fungi, I should say. The water wraith, kind of a play on the whole water weird concept. The water wraith being, I believe, undead, but I'm not positive. But I like that idea. The water horse, which is a type of seal, which fits right into those classic myths of lochs with creatures that live in them. And, they're mysterious and strange, and they perfectly fit that vibe. I read that, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. The pigeon toad. The phantasmal frogfish. Again, I love me some alliteration. So you have a wonderful selection, and there's lots of titans in here. And one of the titans they've got in here is a fusion of titan and Alaskan king crab. So it's got this centaur thing going on, humanoid from the waist up, and from the waist down, it's king crab, awesome. The illustration is beautiful, and it's really well done. Now, they do have some demons and devils in here, which are not things I'm a big fan of. I freely admit this. I never really liked them a whole lot. I find kind of dull. But if you need aquatic versions thereof, this book has got you covered, which is useful, because I know there are people out there that love devils and demons. There are all kinds of tweaks on real-world things that are like plays on actual, myths. Like I said, the water horse. There are those kind of things in here throughout the book. So it has a tie-in to a lot of the traditional monster manuals that you'll find in other publications, and originally, of course, the original D&D game, which had a lot of mythological creatures. So there's mythological creatures in here that are more endemic to the aquatic environments. And another thing this book has is if you need high challenge rating monsters, there are some really, really powerful high challenge rating monsters in this book. I mean, things that are going to take on the biggest, toughest, epic level characters. There's one creature in here. It's a fusion of shark and crab. It was originally bred as a war beast. The war's over. The people that bred them are all wiped out, but the beasts went feral. They're like a challenge rating 11, and they come in swarms as much as 30. A school of 30 of these things. That's going to present a challenge to any party. I don't care what level you are. So you could use that as a medium level challenge with just having one of them. Or if you need to challenge a higher level party, you just crank out as many as you want. Or use them as war beasts again. They've been tamed by something else and are being used as war beasts, as opposed to being feral. So there's a lot of variety in here, from low level stuff all the way up to the high level things, and of course all the player character races are present in this book, so you get an idea of what they have available. Now, the one thing I did think about this is that every one of these creature settings, because it's an environment that deals with the underwater, has a buoyancy rating and a depth tolerance rating, which makes perfect sense in this book. So you know how fast they sink. There's a couple of most of these creatures have a negative buoyancy. Some of them have a neutral, so they kind of hover, left to their own devices. And they all have depth tolerances. Some can go down to 300 feet. Some can go down to 30,000 feet, and some have depth sensitivity. If they're designed, they've evolved on the abysmal plane, they go up too high, they begin to suffer the bends. So that they have a range that says, okay, you can go here to here, you can't go any higher than that. Which again makes sense. These are reflections of real world creatures and real world animals, and this is how it works in the oceans. Makes perfect sense. And some of the creatures, player characters and the other creatures themselves, some breathe air, are exclusive air breathers. They hold their air. They're like from sea mammals. Some have glungs, which allow them to breathe in air or water. And some are completely and utterly aquatic. They just breathe water. Now you combine these two things, where they breathe, along with depth tolerances, and putting together a player character party, in my opinion, would be a little challenging, because you have to make sure that all of the characters are compatible. That you're not going to have a party where everyone breathes air except for one guy, so he's going to be doing all the other stuff while the rest of the characters float in the surface, twiddling their thumbs. Or the opposite problem, you got one character that breathes air and everybody else doesn't. Or one guy's designed, he wants to play a character from the abysmal plane and everybody else wants to play surface dwellers. I didn't really think about that until I read this particular book. That could be problematic for building a party. So that's really going to be taking some sit down, and we're going to design these characters together so that we have a party that works together. All build sea mammals or surface dwelling. You have reptiles that are surface dwelling as well. And we're all going to build creatures that have lungs and gills. And we're all going to build creatures that are never going to go to the surface. And we're all going to build them with roughly the same depth tolerance, maybe a little difference here and there so that we have a little more range, but no one's going to get left sitting there twiddling their thumbs while Bob is off adventuring, because he's the only one that can do this thing. And of course, at higher levels, that won't be a problem. You'll be able to pick up magic items that'll let you tolerate greater pressure ranges or be able to get to air environs that you can't normally access because you have the ability to now magically breathe either air or water. But at lower levels, that could be a problem. Also, some of the races have the ability to travel on land and some don't. So that's also important. In case there are pieces of land left in the Cerulean Sea setting, and in another setting, there of course probably much more land. The Cerulean Sea has very small quantities of land, whereas most campaigns it's a larger quantity because most of the campaigns take place on a terrestrial environment. But I thought of that while I was reading this book, that you're going to have to really put a little more thought, I think, into party design. It's not that much of an issue for a GM, of course. They can use whatever they want to. They can say it's a variety of this creature that has a different tolerance or different buoyancy level, things like that. So the GM has a lot more leeway in that regard. But of course, if the party player characters bump into a party of NPCs and they don't have matching air requirements or depth tolerances, they may be asking, okay, what's going on? Why are they doing this and we can't, or we don't? So when that comes into effect, the GM might want to pay attention to it. But like I said, overall, this is an excellent book. I have never been disappointed by anything from Alluria Publications I've read. And again, they've done an incredible job with this. Good art, great creatures, all of them for the aquatic environment. Fits into any campaign that uses oceans, and of course is perfectly suited to the Cerulean Seas campaign, putting everything in one nice handy reference for the GM. Now I think this is a purely digital publication. That's what mine is. I don't know if it's ever going to come out in a book. I think that it might be handy to have it in a book, or maybe you can get it done print on demand. Because I think having a book physically next to me is sometimes a lot easier to flip through, particularly if I'm looking for inspiration and I don't have any idea what I'm doing. Just kind of in those lull moments when the other players are doing something, and you can then get an idea that you hadn't thought of. It's a little more difficult for me to do that with a digital document. I don't page through it. I can't literally do it, but I also don't tend to do it that, because you're doing it. It's all, it's a linear progression. There's no flipping to things like that. So I kind of think that having a publication in this regard especially as a monster manual, I think is a bonus. But that's just me. So if you like the ocean, if you enjoy monster manuals, if you like the publications put out by Alluria before, this book is for you. Go forth, buy a copy, read it, enjoy it, and use it. I don't think you're going to be disappointed.